In 1976, two Steves, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, built a computer in a garage. But this was more than the birth of Apple. That humble machine started a tech revolution and a series of rivalries that would shape the future of technology, from your phones, laptops, to even the music playlists we enjoy today. But it hasn't been all rosy. Apple has faced formidable foes at every turn, from Microsoft's software empire to Google's Android revolution, Samsung's hardware dominance, and Spotify's streaming challenge. This is the story of Apple versus everyone. In the mid-1970s, the personal computer was a niche hobbyist pursuit. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had a desire to change that. Their creation, the Apple I, was a stepping stone to the Apple II, which brought computing into homes and schools. Meanwhile, in 1975, Bill Gates and Paul Allen founded Microsoft with a vision to provide software for the growing microcomputer market. Their big break came when IBM chose Microsoft's MS-DOS as the operating system for its PCs. With that, Microsoft became the undisputed software king, while Apple focused on integrated hardware and emphasized a closed ecosystem, controlling both hardware and software to ensure a seamless user experience. Microsoft's focus was on licensing its software, MS-DOS, to various hardware manufacturers, especially IBM, prioritizing widespread adoption over control. These opposing strategies set the stage for the first of many clashes to come. Apple's Macintosh, introduced in 1984, featured a graphical user interface, or GUI, that made computing more accessible. In 1985, Apple licensed portions of its Macintosh GUI to Microsoft for Windows 1.0. But when Windows 2.0 introduced overlapping windows and trash can icons, Apple sued, alleging infringement on Macintosh GUI elements. The case dragged on until 1994, when the court ruled that while specific expressions could be protected, general ideas like overlapping windows and icons could not. This decision allowed Microsoft to continue developing Windows, which later became the dominant PC operating system. This forced Apple to settle and shift to innovation over litigation. By the mid-1990s, Apple was struggling. A series of failed products, leadership changes, and lackluster sales left the company in disarray and threatened its existence. By 1997, Apple brought back Steve Jobs and struck a surprising deal with Microsoft, a $150 million stock investment, Internet Explorer as the default browser on Macs, and 5 more years of Microsoft Office for Mac. Suddenly, Apple had breathing room. Suddenly, the comeback was on. Fast forward to 2001, Apple launches the iPod, making music portable and cool. 2 years later, the iTunes Store launches, making it easy to buy music tracks with just a click. By 2009, iTunes dominated the digital music market, owning over 80% of digital music sales. Microsoft tried to respond with Zune in 2006, attempting to compete with Apple, but it never matched the iPod in market share or cultural impact. Users preferred to stick with Apple thanks to their integration of hardware, software, and content. 2007 changed everything when Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone. It was a revolution, a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator all in one. The sleek design and multi-touch screen instantly set a new standard. Competitors scrambled to catch up. Ironically, one of Apple's early allies was Google. The original iPhone even came with Google Maps and YouTube pre-installed. At the time, the two companies looked like partners shaping the future. But that didn't last. In 2008, Google dropped a bombshell, Android. It was open source, flexible, and free for manufacturers. With companies like Samsung, HTC, and Motorola jumping on board, Android spread fast. By 2012, it dominated over 75% of global smartphone shipments. From that moment on, it was war. A war not just over devices, but ecosystems, app stores, privacy, and the future of how we live digitally. Samsung, a major Android manufacturer, emerged as Apple's fiercest hardware rival, especially after Galaxy S launched in 2010, offering similar features at lower prices. Apple responded with lawsuits numbering over 50 worldwide. the most famous being the US pinch-to-zoom patent case. It resulted in mixed verdicts and billions in settlements, with a U.S. jury awarding Apple over $1 billion in damages in 2012, though the amount was later reduced. Despite Apple's legal victories, Samsung continued to dominate smartphone shipments, with best-selling devices, often offering features and price points that appealed to a broad audience. Spotify arrived on the iPhone App Store in 2009, just a year after introducing cloud-based streaming in 2008. Spotify immediately threatened iTunes' download-based model. Shortly after, battles over App Store fees and Spotify feature removals on Apple Watch spilled into public headlines. Apple's counter to Spotify began in 2015, when Apple acquired Beats Music and Electronics for $3 billion, laying the groundwork for Apple Music to launch in June 2015, with exclusive content deals and a 3-month free trial. After launch, Apple Music recorded a record-breaking 10 million subscribers in 6 months, a feat that took Spotify 6 years to achieve. By mid-2018, Apple Music had fully overtaken Spotify in the number of US paid subscribers. In 2023, the European Commission fined Apple $2 billion after Spotify accused Apple of App Store practices that hindered music streaming competition. This dealt a significant blow to Apple's service revenues and App Store policies. If you're enjoying this in-depth description of Apple's battles, kindly smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss our tech history breakdowns. And drop a comment right now. Which Apple rival do you think gave it the toughest challenge? Remember IBM? Throughout the 1980s, Apple and IBM exchanged figurative blows over the future of personal computing. IBM had its business-first PCs, while Apple had the consumer-friendly Macs. They tussled for corporate and educational market dominance. In a dramatic shift, IBM and Apple set aside hostilities on October 2, 1991. To form the AIM Alliance and co-develop the PowerPC RISC processor. IBM brought Power-based designs, Apple contributed its Pink OS vision, and Motorola agreed to manufacture the chips. PowerPC powered every Mac from 1994 to 2006 until Apple pivoted to Intel. Beyond hardware, Apple and IBM invested in a next-gen OS called Pink, later Taligent. Ambitious but delayed, secrecy surrounding the OS drove developers to Windows, and Taligent never gained traction. When PowerPC couldn't meet Apple's low-power performance targets, Steve Jobs stunned the industry at WWDC 2005 by announcing a shift to Intel CPUs, ending the AIM era and introducing the Rosetta emulator to bridge Mac software. Before Samsung's Galaxy S made it a fierce rival, it was one of Apple's top display and memory suppliers. At the height of their rivalry, Apple decided to quietly wean itself off Samsung components, partly to limit a dominant competitor's influence over its supply chain. Fitbit was regarded as a pioneer in fitness-focused wearables in 2013, but not for long. In 2015, the Apple Watch was launched, quickly absorbing health tracking features to become a full-blown smartwatch. By 2023, Apple Watch led global smartwatch shipments with roughly 30% market share versus Fitbit's single digits. Apple even added ECG, blood oxygen monitoring, sleep tracking, and gym kit integration. Fitbit tried to counter with longer battery life and lower prices, but was never able to regain leadership. Back when Nokia was the undisputed king of mobile phones, it held a treasure trove of essential wireless patents. In late 2009, Nokia sued Apple over 3G and WCDMA technology. Apple fired back with its own lawsuit, igniting a global legal war. After years of courtroom battles, the two giants settled in May 2017, with Apple paying over $2 billion up front, plus a multi-year licensing deal to end the dispute. Apple also locked horns with Qualcomm, the undisputed leader in mobile modern chips, over what Apple called unfair and excessive royalty rates. Beyond being a supplier, Qualcomm held key patents that powered most smartphones on the planet. The legal war spanned continents, with both companies filing filing lawsuits across multiple countries. Then, in a surprise move in April 2019, they abruptly settled. Apple agreed to pay an undisclosed sum and signed a 6-year licensing deal, along with a 2-year chipset supply agreement. Apple's first UI project, Lisa, was expensive and underpowered. Steve Jobs famously sidelined Lisa due to cost, focusing instead on a portable version, codenamed Macintosh, which became the 1984 hit. But it left internal divisions that culminated in Jobs being ousted in 1985. Apple's Newton message pad launched in the early 90s with big dreams but flopped hard, clunky, expensive, and years ahead of its time. It fizzled out by 1998. But those failures weren't wasted. Newton's struggles laid the foundation for something legendary, the iPhone's sleek, intuitive touch interface that would change the world forever. As iPhone sales grew, accounting for over 50% of Apple's revenue in 2024, concerns arose about neglecting the Mac. Some executives worried the iPad and Mac lines would suffer. However, the introduction of Apple Silicon M1 chip in 2020 revitalized Mac performance and profits, proving Apple's vertical integration strategy paid off across their product lines. The exit of legendary designer Sir Johnny Ive after nearly 3 decades marked a cultural shift at Apple. Ive's less but better philosophy defined the iMac, iPod, iPhone, and Apple Watch. His departure triggered questions about Apple's future design culture. With hardware markets maturing, Apple invested heavily in services like iCloud, Apple Music, and Apple TV+. In 2024, services generated over $80 billion in annual revenue, hinting at a strategic pivot towards recurring income streams and diversification. This shift was mirrored by Microsoft pivoting to cloud. Microsoft's Azure revenues hit $98 billion in 2024, showing both companies embrace an evolution from PC-centric to platform and service leaders. But Apple isn't stopping there. For years, whispers of a secret Apple car have fueled speculation. Leaks, hires, patents, it all pointed to one thing. Apple wants to drive into the future of transportation. If that ever happens, it could set the stage for a clash with Elon Musk himself. But before Apple can take on Tesla, it has to deal with a bigger problem: itself. Behind the sleek product launches and record profits, there's been friction. Tensions over remote work, employee activism, and concerns about innovation have stirred unrest inside Apple's famously secretive culture. Even leadership has come under fire, with some questioning whether Tim Cook's Apple is too safe, too corporate, too unlike the rebellious Apple that once changed the world. Because sometimes Apple's biggest threat is Apple. And now the verdict. Who really won? By 2025, all players carved sustainable niches. Microsoft leads in the enterprise and cloud services, generating $245 billion in revenue and $88 billion in net income in 2024. Apple dominates premium consumer electronics and services, with $391 billion in revenue and $94 billion in net income in 2024. Google Android powers billions of devices globally, strong in advertising though lagging in hardware profits. Samsung, top smartphone shipper by volume, offsetting slim margins with display and memory businesses. Spotify set the standard for audio streaming but trails in profitability and user base growth. Each company carved out its niche. Apple mastered integration and brand loyalty among premium consumers. Microsoft cemented dominance in enterprise and cloud computing. Google achieved massive scale through Android and advertising. Samsung excelled in hardware volume and innovation. Spotify redefined music consumption despite stiff competition. Ultimately, there is no single victor. The relentless competition among these tech giants spurred innovation, with each prevailing in its domain, offering consumers better products and services. The true winners are we, the consumers, who benefit from this relentless innovation driven by historic rivalries. If you loved this journey through corporate warfare, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos detailing the stories behind the world's most iconic companies.